He was the kind of man people trusted with their lives. A church leader, a mentor, a man everyone admired for his wisdom and faith. But behind that holy smile, he was hiding a secret so dark it would cost an innocent girl her life. And when the truth finally came out, it left an entire congregation shattered. Before we dive in, tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and make sure you subscribe to Bite Crimes. Your support encourages us to keep bringing you chilling, educational, and eye-opening stories from the dark corners of the internet and beyond. Now, sit back, relax, and let us begin this story in full. In a small suburban community in the Midwest, there stood a church that was more than just a place of worship. For many families, it was a second home, and at the heart of it all was Pastor Richard Coleman, a 51-year-old man who embodied everything people thought a spiritual leader should be. Richard had been leading the congregation for nearly 2 decades. He officiated weddings, comforted grieving families at funerals, and baptized newborns with a warm smile. To the outside world, he was flawless. People often said, if there's anyone who can't be tempted by sin, it's Pastor Coleman. But what no one knew was that Richard lived a double life. By day, he preached about honesty, humility, and sacrifice. By night, he sat behind a glowing computer screen, using his advanced IT skills to siphon money from the very church that trusted him. This wasn't some random crime of opportunity. Richard was clever. Years earlier, before becoming a full-time pastor, he had worked in cybersecurity. That knowledge became his weapon. He had created backdoors in the church's financial software, slowly moving small amounts of money into accounts he controlled. The sums were small enough not to raise suspicion at first, but over the years, they added up to hundreds of thousands of dollars. Enter Emily Parker, a bright, kind-hearted 17-year-old who had grown up in the church. Emily was the kind of teenager who volunteered for everything, from helping with the children's choir to running the church's new live stream setup during Sunday services. She loved technology and dreamed of studying computer science. One Sunday afternoon, while updating the church's streaming software, Emily noticed something odd. Some of the financial records didn't add up. At first, she thought it was a glitch, but curiosity got the better of her, and she started digging deeper. What she uncovered shocked her. The transactions showed small amounts being withdrawn at unusual times, all leading back to one source, Pastor Coleman. Emily was young, but she wasn't naive. She knew what she had found was serious, embezzlement on a massive scale. But more than that, she felt betrayed. The man she looked up to as a father figure, the one who had told her to live a life of truth, was stealing from the church family. She confronted him privately, not wanting to embarrass him in front of others. Emily thought maybe he would admit his mistake, ask for forgiveness, and make things right. Instead, she triggered something darker inside him. When Emily revealed what she knew, Richard's calm mask cracked. For the first time in decades, he felt cornered. She was only 17, but she represented the collapse of everything he had built. His reputation, his power, his carefully hidden crimes, all threatened by the discovery of a teenage girl. In his mind, there were only 2 choices: confess and lose everything, or silence her forever. That night, after choir practice, Emily stayed behind to pack up equipment. Richard offered her a ride home. It was nothing unusual. He often gave young members lifts if their parents weren't around. Emily trusted him. Everyone did. But Emily never made it home. Her body was discovered 2 days later in a wooded area just outside town. The community was devastated. Emily was beloved, full of life, with her whole future ahead of her. The idea that someone would harm her was unthinkable. At her funeral, Pastor Coleman stood at the pulpit, his voice trembling with rehearsed sorrow as he comforted the grieving congregation. People wept as he spoke about faith and endurance. No one suspected that the man delivering the eulogy was the very one who had taken Emily's life. For 2 years, Richard carried on with life as though nothing had happened. He preached every Sunday, shook hands at the church door, and even comforted Emily's parents when they wept in the pews. To the outside world, he seemed like a man carrying the weight of his flock's sorrow. But inside, he lived with a gnawing paranoia. Every police siren, every late-night phone call, every mention of Emily's name sent chills down his spine. He told himself he was safe. There had been no evidence linking him to the crime, no witnesses, and as for the missing church funds, he had erased the digital trails carefully enough, or so he thought. But evil has a way of leaving traces, and Richard's mask was about cracked. Emily's case had gone cold. With no leads and no suspects, local authorities struggled to move forward. But in the second year after her death, a new detective joined the precinct. Detective Sarah Mitchell, a meticulous investigator with a reputation for never letting details slip through the cracks. Sarah reviewed Emily's files and noticed something odd. The timeline of her disappearance coincided with a gap in the church's financial records. That was strange. Why would a financial system glitch align with the night Emily vanished? Digging deeper, Sarah requested access to old church accounting logs. What she found pointed to embezzlement, systematic theft hidden under layers of false entries. It wasn't proof of murder, but it raised a chilling possibility. Had Emily discovered the theft before her death? Sarah began re-interviewing people close to Emily, piecing together her final days. Multiple church members recalled seeing Emily with Pastor Coleman shortly before she disappeared. While most brushed it off as routine, to Sarah it was a glaring red flag. As detectives quietly dug deeper, Richard noticed things shifting. Subtle questions during friendly chats. New faces attending Sunday services. Some of them undercover officers blending into the congregation. He could feel the net closing, though no one had directly accused him yet. But Richard's arrogance convinced him he could talk his way out of anything. After all, hadn't he fooled them all for years? Still, cracks began to show. His sermons grew less passionate. His smile seemed forced. Members of the church whispered about how he looked more tired, more withdrawn. Rumors swirled, but no one dared speak them aloud. Then came the moment Richard had always feared. A subpoena for the church's financial records landed on his desk. The same records Emily had once seen. Detective Sarah had found her thread, and she was about to pull it, unraveling everything. On a bright Sunday morning, as the congregation sang hymns, Richard stepped to the pulpit to deliver his sermon. But before he could speak, the church doors swung open. Police officers marched down the aisle, their voices echoing. "Richard Coleman, you are under arrest." Gasps filled the sanctuary. Some screamed. Others sat frozen in disbelief. The man they had trusted for decades was being handcuffed in front of them. But what evidence had finally tied him to Emily's death? And how did investigators connect his cybercrimes to murder after 2 long years of silence? Stay with me, because we are about to unravel how detectives built their case, the shocking digital trail Richard couldn't erase, and how justice finally caught up a man who thought he was untouchable. The image of Pastor Richard Coleman being let out of his own church in handcuffs spread like wildfire across the community. Phones were raised, recording every step as stunned church members whispered and cried. Some begged the police to stop, insisting there must be a mistake. Others sat silently, unable to process what they were seeing. For 2 years, Richard had fooled them. He had buried Emily, not just in the ground, but under layers of lies, sermons, and prayers. But Detective Sarah Mitchell had finally unearthed what he could not cover: the truth. It began with the church's financial logs. Hidden in the lines of code and digital entries were irregular patterns, slight manipulations that no ordinary church staff member could pull off. Sarah consulted with a cyber forensics team, who confirmed what she had suspected. Someone with advanced knowledge of cybersecurity had embezzled hundreds of thousands of dollars over several years. But the real breakthrough came when they examined old backup drives from the church's live stream system. Emily, being the church's volunteer tech assistant, had unknowingly left behind digital footprints of her discovery. Notes she had typed on the system, login timestamps, and her attempts to trace the stolen money all pointed to one thing: she had uncovered the theft just days before she vanished. That was enough for investigators to look closer at Richard. Phone records placed him with Emily on the night she disappeared. Surveillance cameras from nearby streets showed his car heading toward the wooded area where her body was later found. The circumstantial evidence was piling up into something undeniable. As news spread, the congregation fractured. For decades, Richard had been their rock. Now, he was exposed as a fraud, a thief, and a murderer. Parents pulled their children from youth programs. Attendance plummeted. Donations stopped. Emily's parents, sitting silently at the back of the courtroom during Richard's first hearing, could barely look at him. The betrayal was too heavy. They had trusted him to mentor their daughter. Instead, he had stolen her future. Even Richard's closest allies in the church, men and women who once defended him at every turn, began to question their loyalty. The hardest part for many was reconciling the man they thought they knew with the monster he truly was. What do you think? Can a community ever truly recover from this kind of betrayal? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Psychologists who later studied Richard Coleman said his dual life wasn't unusual in cases of fraud and violent crime. He was driven by a mixture of greed, ego, and fear of exposure. To Richard, the money wasn't just about luxury, it was about control. He believed he was untouchable, smarter than everyone else. But when Emily discovered his secret, she threatened that illusion. In his twisted logic, silencing her seemed like the only way to protect his empire of lies. This wasn't about passion or sudden rage. It was a cold calculation, the same careful planning he used to hack financial systems, now applied to covering up murder. When the trial began, prosecutors laid out the story piece by piece. They showed the stolen funds, the forged digital entries, and the surveillance footage. They presented Emily's notes, proving she had discovered the theft. They showed how Richard's lies unraveled when detectives confronted him with evidence. The defense tried to argue that the evidence was circumstantial. They suggested that Emily's death could have been the result of someone else in the church who also had access. But the jury wasn't convinced. The digital fingerprints, the phone records, and the timeline all pointed in one direction. The most damning moment came when prosecutors revealed a chilling detail. Richard had searched online for methods of erasing digital evidence just days after Emily's disappearance. That sealed his fate. After weeks of testimony, the jury returned with their decision. Guilty on all counts, embezzlement, fraud, and first-degree murder. When the verdict was read, Richard showed no emotion. Some said he looked relieved, as if the burden of maintaining his double life had finally broken him. Emily's parents wept quietly, holding each other's hands. For them, justice was bittersweet. No sentence could bring their daughter back, but at least a man who betrayed her trust, and theirs, would never walk free again. Richard was sentenced to life in prison without parole. This story is more than just a chilling tale of betrayal. It's a warning. Evil doesn't always come with a mask or a weapon. Sometimes it wears a suit, carries a Bible, and stands at the front of a church. Cybercrime, too, is rarely about faceless hackers in dark rooms. It can be the person you least expect. The trusted friend, the respected leader, the one you think could never do wrong. Emily's story reminds us of the importance of vigilance, transparency, and accountability, even in places we assume are safe. Because when trust is exploited, the damage runs deeper than money. It tears apart lives, families, and entire communities. For 2 years, Richard Coleman believed he had buried his crimes with Emily Parker. But the truth has a way of resurfacing. And when it did, it exposed him not just as a thief, but as a murderer. His story is a stark reminder. No matter how well hidden, evil cannot remain in the shadows forever. And taking innocent lives to cover crimes only leads to deeper destruction. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this chilling story. If this case shook you as much as it shook us, let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. Don't forget to like this video if you found it powerful, and most importantly, subscribe to BYTECRIMES. Your support is what keeps us motivated to bring you more true, chilling, and educational stories from the dark corners of the internet and beyond. Because in the end, our mission is simple: to uncover the truth, no matter how well it's hidden.